Okay, so I've got a new guest with me here today, but he's someone who will be familiar to many of you, or certainly his voice will be, and that's Guy Rowland. So, for those of you who don't know, many of you will know Guy is the person behind Lucy Letby Films. He's the person behind the Botched documentaries that have been released. That many people have commented, I think quite rightly, that they're better than certain other broadcasters did with quite significantly larger budgets. So yeah, I've known Guy for a while. He filmed me in my front room. You've probably seen that video, and yeah, we've been in contact for a while. So yeah, without further ado, I just want to welcome you to the channel. Thanks for joining us, Guy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Great. So we're going to obviously discuss a lot about the Lucy Letby case today. We're going to discuss about a lot about your films, but I'd like to begin particularly when I've got a new guest, by talking about the background of the person. Now, I know for a fact you have quite an interesting background and quite an interesting career. So, can you tell us about what you do, how you came to do that, and anything else of relevance, really?
Sure, it's a sort of matter of opinion, isn't it? If it's interesting, because it's like for running people, I'd probably be bored to tears because it's nothing about. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a medic, and nothing like that. I've been working in telly my whole life. Well, not when I was a kid, that would be odd. But when I got the first job at 18, the BBC. So I was a BBC staff member for about 15 years. You might want to terminate the interview now, Chris. I know what
No,
you're
no, I
saying.
already knew that. I already knew that. So it's fine.
All right, we got over that. And it's like it was, and I worked in technical area in sound in television centre. Remember the big building that was Children in Need and all that. That was I worked with Children in Need. I worked on a lot of comedy stuff, which was just brilliant. Stuff like I was a massive Vic and Bob fan, and I worked on Shooting Stars, and that was just like wonderful. I just I pinch myself when I think of the stuff I worked on.
Yeah.
Um, and then a lot of kids stuff as well. It was a show. The most fun I ever had in telly was a show, a highly disreputable children's show called Dick and Dom in the Bungalow. That was unrehearsed but planned, sort of mayhem, and yeah. Once you faced that, you feel you could take on anything. That was really good fun. And then I sort of moved more into post production, which is for people who don't know the term. It's after films after a show has been filmed and edited, and I will do the sound, and I will all the dialogue and the sound effects and the music, and I put all that together. And I also actually started doing music as well, so composing. I did some TV themes, again mainly kids stuff. So that was sort of a second um, thing that I did. And none of that's the stuff that I do now, really,
Mm.
because the third thing that I do is screenwriter, and that's something that I've always loved. Started in my late 20s, 30s, I think, and it was just a sort of a hobby. I made one tiny film, which is another whole story. It's amazing, I won't go into that, but a real small indie film. But then I got a Hollywood representation in 2020, a company called Echo Lake, after I won a contest called The Finish Line, which is a brilliant competition with a pilot TV script, and they are producing a show of mine as well, which still hasn't been made, but this is how long Hollywood takes. Um, there was someone on a podcast I listened to who'd taken 20 years for his this one project of his to be made, but he said that's not the amazing thing. When I thought about it, and he's done big stuff, he said the fastest I've ever done something is 5 years. So it's a very long process, which is my excuse for why you haven't seen anything I've done yet. There's a little indie film, hopefully shooting next year, which I'm very excited about that. And all that stuff, you're probably kind of guessing that's kind of what I do with the films. I write I write them, I edit. That's another sort of skill I sort of picked up. Do all the sound, the music. I score them like I score you would score a film. And so all those kind of mishmash of skills kind of help me to sort of make these little films for about £0 and 0 pence, as you say. I've not got the Netflix budget, which I would love, because whatever else we think about the Netflix documentary, it looked fantastic.
Mm.
But anyway, yeah. So that's in a very brief nutshell. That's me.
That's great. So I want to ask you a question about screenwriting, actually.
Yeah.
So was this something you always wanted to do? Did you gravitate towards it at a certain point? How did you end up in that field? 'Cause it's quite a specific thing to do. I know from my writing, it's very. I mean, people would think, "Oh, Chris could go and be a screenwriter," and I probably could, but there would be a very significant transition from what I do now to screenwriting. So, how did you
Mm.
become interested in it?
It is a very different skill, and I didn't really have a background of writing at all, and it was in my 20s, I think. I think actually it was the film Thelma and Louise. That Thelma and Louise, I was obsessed by. I absolutely adored that film, and I got married in '93. We went on a honeymoon to sort of the areas where it was filmed. I mean, it wasn't. We didn't go on a Thelma and Louise honeymoon, which would be a really weird thing.
Well, we wouldn't
But
have this
it was
conversation, would we?
but it's gorgeous red rock country in Arizona and Utah and all this, and we ended up big road trip ended up in LA, and there was a script. They used to have script shops there, and I went in and I bought the script for Thelma and Louise, which I still have. It's somewhere over there. And I read it on the plane on the way back, and it just knocked me for six. I couldn't believe how evocative it was. It's so few words. The layout is very sparse. The descriptions are very succinct. It's a very different thing to reading a novel, but it was so evocative and it was so well written. And the killer was that this is the author, Callie Curry. This was her first script, and so I'm kind of going, well, making films is quite hard. That's quite ambitious, but I could, surely I can write a script. And it sort of set me off. And to this day, I just love the discipline of that. I love the discipline of you can't say how people, you can't say Jane walked in the room and she reflected on her long time working as an accountant. When you can't do any of that. You have to, it's show and don't tell, and you have to be incredibly succinct. And it's yeah. So I really love that, and I wrote stuff in the '90s that was terrible. And I started to get okay at it. It takes a long time to sort of find your voice, as they say, and work out, how to best express yourself, and crucially to stop copying people. If I don't write Thelma and Louise 2 guy, that's just like a terrible, terrible idea. It's like it's finding what it is that you can do and what you can, what perspective in your life you can bring to things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean that's all very interesting, and I guess people will know now why your films online are very good. Um, so you're like myself, you're leading a normal life, you're doing your work, had no intention of probably doing anything else, and then at some point this overarching issue of the Lucy Letby case came into your life.
Hmm.
So when did that first happen? How did you first become interested in it? And how did you first start to think this could be a miscarriage of justice?
So I'm not really into true crime. I wasn't following the case. I don't listen to true crime. It's always, I don't like this kind of, there's something ghoulish about it to me. Why you would focus on the worst people in the world and the awful things they do. I don't, it's not my thing. So I wasn't watching
Can
the
I
case.
explain why I'm interested in
Yeah, yeah, sorry, that sounds
it?
terrible, doesn't it? Go on,
It's
Chris,
fine.
go
It's
on.
fine. I think I'm fascinated by the psychology of why people do extreme things. Obviously, acts are awful, but I've always been interested in criminal psychology, and it would be one of my career choices, probably would
Mm.
be my second career choice after what I do now. And I just think it's fascinating that to a greater or lesser extent, most people follow the rules of reasonable behavior. Whether we agree with all the laws of the society or not is another matter. But we're all within a spectrum. Some of us will stretch the rules more than others, but most of us won't do these very extreme acts. Very, very small percentage of people will do these extreme acts because we just know it's wrong. You can't do that. Um, and then there's a certain number of people that will. And I'm always fascinated with how do they become that? From a psychological perspective, is interesting. But please
No,
continue.
an absolutely fair comment, and it's like we don't not do those things just because someone's told us it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's like we don't want to do those things. That's sort of
Mm.
really important, and no, you're absolutely right, and And you know, in terms of a script that I wrote a long time ago, I did research psychopathy, and I suppose my interest is less in what makes someone a psychopath and more about what's the effect that has on the people around them. I tend not to like power stories and power struggles, kings, queens, political. I'm interested in ordinary people, and it's like, what's it like to be at the other end of a psychopath? And the other end of horrendous things that are happening. And so that's, you know, there's an obvious link there with the Lucy case. But I wasn't paying attention. The verdicts came out, and so I kind of thought, okay, I know how telly works. This is quite good. I saw Panorama was going to be out. BBC on the same day we're going to put out Panorama. It's like a 1 hour documentary. Now that's all I knew that will have been filmed a long time ago. They'll have added in the last little bits. It's quite impressive technically of how they do that. 95% of it is good to go, and then they add in Judith Morris screaming out the courtroom saying she's guilty and gurning, and then they put the end credits on, and that's it. Um, so I thought, well, this is good because I don't really know anything about the case, and crucially, I thought, obviously, she doesn't look the type. That's the story, really, isn't it? She doesn't look at anything like you'd expect. How did it happen? How did they miss it? What's happened in her past? What can they now say? Crucially, now reporting restrictions are kind of lifted, what can we now learn? And so I sat down and quite okay, and there's all this evidence and the duty chart, and this all looks terrible. And then Dawn comes up, and Dawn says that she's not just that she's, you know, a friend would expect to advocate, I suppose you might say. But it's not just that she's a nice person, she's the kindest person she's ever known.
Hmm.
She likes rescue animals, all this stuff. And I'm kind of going, this is really weird because they'll have been. I mean, the police would have been digging for years. The journalists would have been digging for years. I was thinking about how it's constructed, and that's all they can find. Does someone speak up that says that? And so it kind of sat there at that point. And I remember talking to a friend about it, and we talk about this kind of stuff. And both of us were saying, I don't get it. I just don't get it. But look, evidence looks like she'd done it. And we would say things like, well, I suppose 1 in 1 billion you get this. You know, you get the really inexplicable aberration. And it was like 9 months later when I read I read the Guardian. That sounds like a Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, I'm Guy. I'm Guardian reader. But I read the Guardian, and it was the David Conn and Felicity Lawrence. I think they did the
Yeah.
piece on it. I'd not been aware of the New York. I'd not been aware of anything since I hadn't looked into it, which I
Hmm.
kick myself on now. And it was instant. As soon as I read that, I knew it. I just knew that I should have paid more attention. That I should have that there was something not right here. And then that was it. I dug in and started um, looking at the New Yorker piece and everything. And it had chimed with I had got interested in the Amanda Knox case as well because
Oh.
similarly it was a you know there was a young woman front you know that was the story. It was this young woman and this terrible story. And then I looked at that and I kind of thought there is no evidence. This is a witch trial. This is clearly a modern day witch trial. Is what Amanda Knox had. And I remember saying to people, "You've got to see this. This is a witch trial." But it could. I can't believe that in Italy, which is a modern liberal democracy, it's still got a medieval witch hunt. It would never happen here. Ha 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 ha.
Hmm.
And so I ate my words there. So that was it. From that point on, well, that was the point where I thought I've got to write a little thing or do a blog. And then I thought, well, why don't I see if I can do a little condensed 10-minute video just to kind of, I just couldn't get over how plausible the story of bad care was and how implausible the story of this seeming saint practically suddenly doing these horrific acts. So that's where I started. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I think in terms of the 1 in 1 billion thing that you mentioned, I think the reality is it doesn't happen.
yeah.
So I mean I think I don't know if that was my initial red flag. So I've described the process of what happened to me a few times, and it was certainly one of the red flags was, well, why has this happened? I mean, this just doesn't happen. And I wish I could go back and listen to the radio report I heard again, but I think they must have said in the radio report, she was a normal nurse. People thought the beige comment probably came out at that time.
Mm.
There were no red flags. And It doesn't happen. You don't have serial killers that there's nothing in the background and no one suspects anything as well. Maybe sometimes they're good at covering their tracks, but it just doesn't happen because
No, no,
it's such
like I
an
said,
aberrant act
yeah,
to kill
it's
anyone, but to kill multiple people and then to kill multiple babies, um, there have to be some pretty strong indications that you're capable of that.
right, right. It just doesn't ring true in any kind of. We know how humans work. We are humans, and this
Mm.
isn't. We know there are bad people, but it's like, well, that's not the pattern. Even as someone who is quite, it's a sort of a myth. This idea that someone very quietly can live a completely normal life, and there are no tells anywhere. I agree with you. And very occasionally there was a famous case in the 18th century, I think, of a man who was in a horrendous industrial accident and had a metal pole impact his head, and he survived. But he was a completely changed person, and he became a psychopath. That's the story afterwards, and it's like, okay, well, has she had an iron bar through her head? Is there some incredible dramatic thing that's happened that might explain why she would totally change behaviour? It doesn't look like it to me. There was, yeah, so it was, it just didn't, there is something wrong with this picture. It just sort of screamed at me from a very human perspective, hearing, Dawn's bravery of speaking up then when no one else did. She, as and when Lucy is exonerated, there's a million things that have to happen, but one of the things that should happen is that Dawn should be given an OBE. I think, it's just
Mm.
extraordinary bravery, really.
Yeah, I think we can't overstate that because she knew what the consequences were
Right.
and
Mm.
they were bad,
Yeah.
as we now know. So, yeah, I completely agree with you that it was very courageous. I'm not sure I would have been courageous enough.
No.
I'd like to think I would have been if it was. I think if it's a close friend, though, it changes everything, doesn't it? Because you just think, I can't allow this to happen. I cannot allow this to happen with at least getting something on TV. And I'm sure that's the thought process she went through. She probably thought Lucy is just being absolutely hammered from all angles, and I'm the only one that can speak up for her.
Mm.
Um, so I'm sure that, I mean, I don't want to speak for her, but I'm sure that is the thought process that she would have been through. But I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. That was enormously courageous.
It must have been agonizing, and of course that would have been
Mm.
filmed during the trial. Like all those interviews were filmed. That you don't have the verdict and suddenly interview 50 people. That's all done months in advance.
Mm.
So at that point, Dawn wouldn't have known what the verdict was, but it was everywhere, wasn't it? I was not interested in crime, and I couldn't miss it. It's just on with the front pages and the shock horror headlines. And she was the only one. That's the other thing. The isolation she must have felt.
Mm.
To be the lone voice appearing
Absolutely.
in a program that's called The Nurse That Killed. Ultimately,
Mm.
it's and I think I thought at the time when I wasn't sure about anything, I was just thinking, wow, that's an incredibly loyal friend and is she deluded or what? And then it became very clear, no, she's the sane one.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about numerous things related to the Lucy Letby case, broader topics, you might say. But as we're recording this today, the Chief Constable of Cheshire Constabulary, Mark Roberts, has resigned. Well, announced his retirement. It's basically a resignation because he has said, or has he been sacked? We don't know. But he said, for me, policing has been a vocation and privilege. I'm immensely proud of everything that I've achieved. And what we consider to be the critical statement in the very first paragraph of his statement, I had hoped to take the force through to 2028, but the decision has been made to take the force in a different direction. So we were discussing that before we began recording, and we think this is another very unwise public statement where they're showing the hand and indicating that he's been pushed, basically, and pushed quite hard. So, yeah, I just wondered if you wanted to reflect on that and maybe on the police more broadly, because we're going to be talking about the police as this continues.
Yeah, we are going to be talking about police, aren't we? I think you said they can't help themselves. They cannot help themselves. That things seem to be changing. I think they were really thrilled with their brilliant work, weren't they?
Mm.
And they won an award, for goodness sake, and all of that. And now all they're getting is flack from everybody and flack from the public and flack for MPs and all of that because they're asking difficult questions that they were absolutely refusing to answer. And so they lashed out on the CPS statement. They kind of said they didn't agree with it. I can't read the exact wording. You probably can remember, but they obviously will respect it. But clearly they were very unhappy. Um, Now he's been essentially shown the door, and he's yelling that on the way out of the door, isn't he? I don't know. We might find out one day what's going on, what's behind that. Is it just, it could be nothing to do with the Lucy case. We just don't know. But it's pretty much the most notorious case of the century so far in the UK, and it's Cheshire Police's watch. So I don't
I mean,
really.
to me, it seems extraordinarily unlikely that it's not Lucy's case.
Hmm.
Because they're only dealing with one really big thing. I mean, they may have other big cases we don't know about, but obviously this is the biggest thing they've done. It's probably the biggest thing they've ever done, arguably. And you know, in a way, he's the fall guy because I'm sure when he sent that letter in response to David Davis, I'm sure he went to the people that ran the investigation, which obviously isn't him, and said, right, David Davis has said this. Do you have any response? And they probably put something together and said and gave it to him. And I'm sure that he sought reassurances from them that what they're saying was true. Now, obviously, his big error of judgment. It kind of reminds me of the Mandelson thing.
Hmm.
Um, I feel I'm not a fan of Keir Starmer. Nothing could be further from the truth. But I feel a bit sorry for him about Mandelson because that was probably one of 1,000 things he did that day. And probably someone said to him, "Oh yeah, this guy. Yeah, I know he's not got the
Hmm.
best reputation, but he's a safe pair of hands. He's done this stuff. He's 30 years in government, etc., etc. Just appoint him." And he said, "Yeah, all right." But that was an error of judgment. He should have said, "Hold on a second. I've heard this name before."
Hmm.
He couldn't possibly have known that
Hmm.
what would happen happened. I would imagine. But I think this is very similar. This is a terrible error of judgment by Mark Roberts, where he should have been certain before he sent that letter that's got his name on it that what he was saying was true. And given that absolutely everything that was said in David Davis's speech can be fact checked, and I did it on this channel, to make, it's a forceful letter saying you should apologise in Parliament. If you're going to make that kind of request or um, forceful accusation, you might describe it as, then you've got to be certain you're right. You've got to be correct. And to be completely wrong is just a dereliction of basic duty because that letter's got your name on it. So you need to be saying what you're saying is correct. And he just failed. And that's an error of judgment because he shouldn't have trusted the people that said, "Oh yeah, of course, Mark, everything's fine. This is the case and that's the case." And actually nothing they told him was correct. And he's paid the ultimate price for that. So I mean, I think it would be extraordinary if it was just, oh, maybe you should take another refinement because we want to bring someone younger in, or whatever. I think unquestionably this will be directly related to that very embarrassing episode for the Cheshire Police. But as you rightly say, they just can't help themselves.
Uh,
They
do
they
you know what?
they go
As
on.
we're talking about it, it's like there's a little bit of a pattern here. Something that Steve Watts says a lot. Who's been on the channel, the ex-head of lead investigation for in healthcare deaths, and he talks about it being they're governed by emotion, and we are. I mean, it's probably something we're going to come onto in another context,
Mm,
but they the CPS became emotional, the police were emotional,
mm,
and it's like these responses are emotional responses. You can tell
mm,
they're couched in language that is PR, but they're emotional responses. They're
mm.
not thinking critically, they're not thinking logically, which from a police department is a bit terrifying, to be honest. And these are outbursts of emotion that we're seeing. So, yeah.
Someone actually emailed me. I won't mention who it was, and said a few things about my book. And one of the things they said that was, I think, a very astute observation was that it's a very male book in terms of writing. It's not emotional, and that's absolutely true. Um, and that was a conscious decision because I
Mm,
didn't want it to be anything like Judith and Jonathan's book, where
mm,
emotion came in all the time. There are all
mm,
these emotional statements, and obviously, oh, I saw her in court and issue this and issue that, and even the title's Lucy Letby Unmasked. It's not an examination of Lucy Letby's court case, or I was in court for Lucy's court case. Here's what happened. Nothing like that. It's like, oh, let's unmask the. But you can't unmask the person, Judith, because you don't know her. You've never spoken to her.
mm,
So you can make. and I realized when I wrote the book I had to have a chapter about Lucy's background, but I don't profess to know her and I don't profess to know who she is. All I can do is say this is what we know about her.
Hmm.
Um, and it was for me, it was a very conscious decision to make it as unemotional as possible. There is a bit at the start, and there's a bit at the end that I think is justified, um, because I wanted it to just be the facts and a dispassionate investigation as much as possible. And I think you're right. And again, we discussed this before we start recording. They on in August 2023, if that's the right date, it seems like 10 years ago now. When the conviction was confirmed and the sentencing occurred, and they brought out that stupid YouTube film, they thought we've done an amazing job. We've caught this child killer. Aren't we great? We're going to go down in history. Everyone's going to be patting us on the back for the next 10 years. And that um, that train derailed, I think, a lot more quickly than they could possibly have anticipated. And I'm sure they feel very sorry for themselves now. And they're
Hmm.
thinking, why is everyone picking on us? And I'm sure that is absolutely the prevailing attitude at Blackham Police Station now, particularly among those who were primarily involved in Operation Hummingbird. They're all
Hmm.
thinking, why are they picking our investigation? We worked really hard on it because it's rubbish,
Hmm.
unfortunately, and which is a shame. I don't get any pleasure from saying that. Like I say on this channel sometimes, some of the central officers are stupid, the investigation was incompetent. I don't get any pleasure from saying that, and I'm not saying that to be, it's not hyperbole. It's just the truth,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. That's it. And it's like emotion is. We'll talk about this more later. I know because we'll do some of the things we're going to go on about it. Emotion is incredibly important. It's very central to the case, and emotion isn't a bad thing. Emotion is important, but if you have to be able to separate, you have to be able to kind of say, as a police department, that has to be completely dispassionate. There is no room for that. And I think we'll explore some of these ideas more as we go on. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it is important to make that conscious decision of emotion goes out the window, what are the facts?
Hmm.
That's their job. I mean, fundamentally, that is their job. I think I haven't overemphasized this when I've talked about the Operation Hummingbird film, but actually one of the most worrying and disturbing things is how emotionally involved they become with the families. And one of the things that makes that clear is they devoted so much of that film to talking about how they did become involved with the families and how they had to get a result for the families. It's literally how the film begins,
Hmm.
talking about the families. And then it's always and they promised as well that film. I don't want to talk about this for too long, but they promised that film was headlined as being, "Oh, here's the evidence on which we convicted Lucy Letby." And you watch that film, and at the end of it, you've got no better idea than when you began of how Lucy Letby was convicted and how they conducted the investigation. They told almost nothing of any substance. It's just mostly, "Oh, it's really emotional for us. Oh, we had some really difficult days. Oh, one day the coffee machine broke down. It was awful." It's just it really bears it has almost no relation to the investigation. It's just their feelings about what happened,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think that's quite telling, really.
And it's really important to say, this, certainly for me, it's like there is no criticism on wanting to treat families with the utmost respect
Hmm.
and care, and you do have a duty of care and all of those things. So that's really important.
Yes,
But yeah, it's there's a real sense here that the the priorities in terms of the investigation basics, that's ABC that Steve talks about, which is in the murder investigation manual: accept nothing, believe
leave
nothing,
no one,
question
isn't it?
everything. What I've got my ABC wrong. Um, what is it? It's accept nothing, believe nothing, challenge everything. Got it. There we go. But that's it. And it's like, as I mean, he put it brilliantly when he was in Botched, and he said, "You treat them with utmost respect." You know where this is coming from. This is they've had so many women walking through the door who say horrendous stories that they just, yeah, well, look what you're wearing, love. All right, there is a historical misogyny and all of this stuff, and it's like that's wrong and that's terrible. And it's like you have to kind of, you have to look at all those factors, but you don't then just go the other way and, you know, just run the whole thing on the basis of yeah of emotion and whim, which is what they appear to
Mm,
have done. Yeah.
absolutely. So you just mentioned your Botch films. So this is the thing that most people will recognize you for, primarily, I would say. Although you have some other videos on the channel that have done really well. Um, so I wanted to, I kind of look at something like this, and I'm interested how it's put together. Obviously, you've spent a long time in TV, so you've learned all these visual and audio techniques that I can't do. Um, so I want to ask you quite a few questions about this, but the first one I want to ask you is there's a certain focus to these films. Why did you choose that aspect of the case to focus on? Is there a particular reason?
The botched ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I think that came. It was a snap decision. I think I saw the Netflix trailer and I went, I'm making this, making a series of films because I mean, those of us who have been around this case for a while knew that ITN had done this production deal with Cheshire Police, and it was that was always at risk of being the official version, right? The Hummingbird video that came out, within days of the verdicts, that was the sort of low rent. I mean, it was a corporate video. It wasn't. I don't want to do it down. Technically, it's fine. Its purpose is another matter. But this was the big budget version. I said, and it looks. I was going to say $1 million. It's probably a lot more than $1 million. I was at the Shuley press conference and they were filming there, and they had crew. I mean, it was just vast numbers of people in the crew there. They had steady cams, or I don't know what it was, gimbal things, and all this kind of stuff. So they were filming Shuley, which kind of gave me a bit of heart. So, well, they are talking to Shuley. That's something. But it was pretty obvious from that trailer that this was going to be a very what I knew it wasn't going to do, even from the trailer, is it wasn't going to be in any way questioning all these questions that we have about the case and how it happened. We knew an awful lot by then. And then, so I started work on it. And then when I saw it, it was like everything I feared was true. It was like there wasn't a single question put to Cheshire Police, hard question. They weren't challenged on anything. They just lit them really well and made them look good and had them staring out the window looking, as Steve always says. Um, but in terms of the substance, it wasn't there. And I thought I wanted anyone who had seen that and was interested in the case, I wanted them to be able to go, right, okay, let's have another look at how that investigation, it's called the investigation Lucy Letby, the botched investigation of Lucy Letby, the bill, the acronym was. I thought I've just got to do it. And I was just, as happens to me sometimes, I was just like blindingly fast. I can't quite believe how fast that was actually, because I was interviewing all these people. Steve Watts, who is normally based in Australia, he came over within almost 24 hours of landing. I'd shoved him in front of the camera and he talked for like 2 hours, 2.25 hours. And I said, how on earth are you doing this? You've just flown from Australia. He'd seen, I think he'd talked with David Davis, and then he came and sat down and talked to me, and it's extraordinary his clarity of thought. He said, oh, I can do this. He said, I'll do this all the time, it's fine. I've got my head down in Singapore or whatever on the layover. But he's amazing. And so very quickly, Stephanie Davis as well, I was able to film her going to Parliament, and so very quickly a lot of stuff came together. But in terms of what you choose to put in, it's I write first, script first, and you just have to be very disciplined. And I keep telling myself I do stuff and I have to keep throwing it out. It's like you have to be focused on what exactly is the storytelling. Don't get sidetracked. There are a million rabbit holes you can go down, and you have to be focused on what someone who knows nothing is going to sit down. They don't want a million tangents here. They need to be walked through step by step, very clear what this are and who are the people that I need to talk to. So Stephanie was there in those first days. She was right there at the beginning of the investigation. Steve Watts is the authority on it. Who else did I have in that first one? I can't remember because I interviewed lots of other people later. Oh, Jane Hutton, of course, and her because I knew that she was an absolutely pivotal figure. My dream people to be involved all said yes almost instantly, and so it was like right, I need to tell a story and crack on. But yeah, I mean, there was one in the last one. There's a whole section that I lopped out with a few weeks to go. It's a great section, but I thought it's not really key to the trials. It's kind of, you just have to be disciplined. And I get people to watch works in progress, and they tell me, "What on earth are you doing there, Guy? That I lost you lost me there." And I go, and it's just a process of editing and making it be as clear as you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was gonna ask you a question about while you were speaking there, something occurred to me about the Netflix thing. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but we saw some comments from the police in that film that we know to have very little merit, which I think is a generous description. Um, Now, I'm assuming that when this was edited together, they filmed with them for a long time and they picked the strongest stuff.
Yes.
That's a reasonable assumption, isn't it?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, with that in mind, how would you reflect on what they excluded from this documentary? Um, you
I
know,
thought it was going to be like an eight-parter. I thought they'd been filming for so long,
hmm,
and they will start with how they did the investigation, and then I thought it was possible that they might see when the cracks started to go. That would be really interesting, but that's not what we got at all. In the end, it was this. Yeah, it was their selective editing. Let me give you a really good example. Well, let me give you a good example first, as in what something I think they did well, because it wasn't all bad by any means. And when they looked at like the post-it notes and the "I am evil" and all that, they presented it as and it was very damning. And then they came back to it 20 minutes later, and you saw a completely different skew. And I thought that was really well done. I don't mind people doing that because that was good storytelling. And it's like there was one perspective, it looks damning, and there was another perspective where you go, "Oh, hold on, that's not at all what I thought it was." So that was so credit to them for that. But then another example was just, it was, I can't, there is no good explanation for when Lucy saying no comment in the interviews, that we know that was 2019. That was after goodness knows how many hours and hours, and the solicitor would almost certainly have been saying to her, "They just keep asking you the same thing. They're fishing. You'd say no comment." So she was almost certainly being told not to do that. And at that point, she is so fed up with these hours, and so, you know, mentally she would be in a terrible state. And the fact is that they put that right up front. And so they asked her these very difficult questions. How do you explain these collapses? How is a nurse supposed to explain collapses? No comment. No comment. And I've got a friend who works in TV who said to me, "I still don't." She's about the only person I know who still thinks she's guilty, and he works in TV. And I kind of said, "Just think about that. That was the reality of that. They deliberately selected those particular answers to make her look a certain way, and they never did come back and readdress that one. That was an extreme example of bias, and people sometimes accuse my films of being biased because, well,
well, let me say, I've said
yeah,
it before, I've got no problem with saying again, that was just deliberately deceitful, obviously. I don't
yeah,
think it's even biased, is it?
no, it's deceitful. It's
It's a
deceitful in
deliberate
my book.
misrepresentation of what happened.
Yeah, yeah, and so they get a free pass on that somehow, which really irritates me. And I think the rigor in that program was non-existent. Journalistically, it was a fiasco. Um, they just had really good lenses and lights, and we don't know. I mean, they got that contract, I think, whilst the trial was still going on. I think they got the contract. I understand also they've certainly negotiated. They were negotiating, and they announced it soon afterwards. And it was just going to be the puff piece. And I believe the director was from advertising. It was going to be the look how great we are.
Yeah.
And now that's fine if the story then changes. If you have to reshape your whole focus, and we don't know what was in that contract. I understand money didn't change hands, but this is something we're going to come on to again later.
Mm,
That if you have signed a deal with people who you're working alongside, and they are giving you exclusive footage that's really, really important,
mm.
you are going to want to protect that relationship and not annoy them. I think I would think that's a real risk for the Netflix team.
Yeah. What
Yeah,
do you think of the power dynamic between that? Because I think one. I don't. I mean, you can. I mean, you've just said something immediately that contradicts this, so you may think about this completely differently to me. But I look at that and I think, well, Netflix, they're behind Amazon, Google, they're right up there for internet companies. They're like right at the top. They're a multi-billion company, obviously. Cheshire Police are just a local police constabulary.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like Netflix are more powerful, really, in that relationship. How do you feel about it, and how would you reflect on that?
It's difficult. I think it's such a different kind of power. I think I think they would probably Cheshire Police to use the word seduced, which the CPS used incorrectly. But it's seductive. The thought that I, it's only my hunch, right? This is only
Mm.
my hunch.
Yeah.
But I think all the way along we see evidence that they were really excited by this case and it was going to put them on the map. And that clouded their judgment in the investigation itself and the way that they rushed to judgment in a sense. And I think it's the same thing here. They're kind of rushing to they're the biggest name, they're the global name, Netflix. You would do that. And I might be wrong because they might have done that deal with ITN before they'd done the deal with Netflix. That's the way these things work. The deal was done with ITN, the production company, that then they made the film for Netflix. I don't know how that worked. But yeah, I think that I don't know if it was Netflix more powerful in a sense. I don't know that that would be quite how I'd see it. I think it's a symbiotic thing. Netflix are excited they've got exclusive access. Oh, they've got absolutely traumatizing body cam footage. That's great. No one's seen that before. We'll put that right up front in the trailer. We'll put it in the first minute of the program. So Netflix are thrilled with that collaboration as far as Cheshire Police are concerned. Cheshire Police want to be sure that they're going to come out of it looking good, I would have thought. And that's probably soft power and the way they do that, not money and bribes or anything. I don't believe in that. But I just think it's a mutually advantageous relationship there.
Mm. Okay. How do you feel about the presentation of footage in that film, firstly? And then secondly, how do you feel about the fact that seemingly this was held back for a TV film?
Well, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Uh, no, they shouldn't have used any of that. There's no reason to use that body cam footage other than, I mean, I've got it on my timeline because I'm obviously using clips from that and the other documentaries. And you can see where I've taken clips. And all those sections of black holes, I just scrub through them. I can't watch them again. It's so distressing to watch and hear.
Mm.
Just the audio within 2 minutes is, I just didn't have the words to describe it. And I thought, I cannot believe they're putting this on TV. This is a real family. This is her real parents. Um, I can believe it because no one cares about that in TV when it
Do,
comes to that. And
do
true crime
do you
is
think it would
gold.
be do you think it would be justified if she was 100% guilty, or do you think it still would
Well,
be do you think it
that's
still would be tasteless?
for me it's tasteless, and this is why I say I don't like true crime. I just don't want to see that stuff. I don't want to. It's the same reason why people turned out for public hangings 100 years ago. It's like I don't understand that. I know I never would do that. It's just I know there are awful people in the world and they need to be put away, and I understand that, but I don't get any joy out of it. I don't get any thrill out of that at all. It's just not who I am. So it's a brutal marketplace. True crime is a massive thing. I think we will be seeing how true crime, the genre, I think, has affected this case. It's materially affected the investigation. So in that sense, I'm not surprised. It would be tasteless. I wouldn't like it then. But given that they know at that point that there's a lot of very strong evidence that she's completely innocent of all that, and she's got a real family, you're showing her house now to the world, to her parents' house, all that stuff. And so I had to make a decision, even though there is some, I mean, a lot of that footage is, quote, useful as far as we're concerned to show, I think, that she's behaving in a, very upsetting but completely plausible way. I didn't want to use any of that footage because I think so many people found it so distressing. I didn't want, if her parents ever saw anything I did, I didn't want them to see that. It's bad enough that I'm using the original arrest footage, but
Mm.
that was over every news thing, and everyone has seen that, and it's kind of well, that felt public domain. So anyway, I just made that distinction.
Yeah, that's fair. So you just mentioned there really that kind of there's a moral and ethical guide rail that goes into the process that you go through. But how else do you decide what goes into your videos and what you include and what you exclude?
It is trial and error. It's you're just trying to always say what's the key story. So, like in the last one with the trials, it's like okay, that's a stupidly hard challenge to get a 10-month trial. Which how many videos have you done on Baby C or Baby O? How many hours have you spoken to people about just one of was it how many were 22? Was it originally 22, 21, 22 indictments? Hours and hours and hours. And it's kind of I can't do that. I can't get into the the evidence with all that stuff, or else it would be a 300-part series that would go on forever. And so I wanted to tell the forces that were at work in the trial. I think that's what I was interested in, and then specifically what effect that had on the defendant, Lucy. And it's like and here emotion does come into play because it's that was sort of jumping ahead on things, but that was so excluded, I think, from any sense that she was anything other than a killer. And it's like you have to think of this in a different way. You have to strip away all that construction that was put up around there, and what are you left with? And I think that's the way I saw it. It's like let's see what actually we know. Hardly anyone knows that it was delayed by a week because she was moved and all that stuff, and she didn't have a medication, and they carefully worked over months and months and months until she was ready for her trial, and how hard that was, and it was just blown away. As the words he used, Ben Myers. Um, and so I wanted to start with that because that seemed to frame the whole trial. I knew I wanted to end with her saying, I'm innocent, that somehow she'd managed to stand up in court and say those last two words as the last two words we heard from her. And just that brutalizing process she went through, which, it's very, very hard. But always that thing, if I'm focusing on one particular aspect, like Pajama Gate or something, which is trivial, but it's not trivial in terms of the forces that are at work in that trial. It's just gaslighting. It's just making her feel uncomfortable. It's it's why it was ever allowed, why the judge allowed it, why the defence didn't stand up and say objection, because that's not what we do in the UK, because it's not polite or something. I don't know. It's just it's and so to me those are very important things. And as the point is made in the film, I think Steve makes it. It's like it's all going to her character. It's all saying she's a liar, she's a liar, she's a liar, and it's like, is she? I don't think she is. I think she's someone who's terrified and heavily medicated. But yeah,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
answered the question. I'm not sure it did.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's obviously a difficult question to answer because you
Mm,
just ultimately you just lurch in a certain direction, don't you? And
yeah,
you then once you've decided what to do, you then try and collect the best information. I guess
yeah,
if you were to ask me, how did you decide what to include in your book and how did you decide what to exclude? It just is a judgment call, isn't it? To some
yeah.
extent.
It is.
You
It
can't.
is. It totally is. But I'm just guided by that simplicity for people who don't know anything about the case. I'm always trying. I fight with the script, and I try and can I say this three sentences in two? How can I simplify that? All that stuff. I'm trying to always keep it for people who don't know anything and haven't got long. I mean, I feel bad. This one was 52 minutes, and the first one I did was more like about 12 or something. So I feel there's a lot of mission creep going on. But you've got to earn those times. And it's involvement. That's the thing. It's like you can be bored to tears in a 10-minute video, or you can be completely engaged in a 50-minute. So it's the principles in which you're constructing your story and how you choose. You have got to be ruthless. You've got to just always think, am I just being indulgent here? If I made this point too many times, or am I going too quickly and people aren't picking up the point? It's just that's just the process. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. So, as people probably can imagine, reviewers can probably guess, I've seen all of the botched films, and I think they're all great, but I felt something different with part three. It was very strange because obviously, as you know, I know most of the material that's in that film, but when I watched it, I felt very angry. And I don't usually feel that way now because, obviously I do it all the time. And if I was getting angry all the time, it'd be a bit of an emotional roller coaster. So I do try and keep things as dispassionate as possible. But when I watched that film, I just felt enormously angry about everything that's happened. And particularly, I think the beginning is so effective because you see they've just literally broken her. It's not even that they've had a massive impact on her psychologically. She's broken at the start of that trial. And then I think that was very cleverly contrasted with Judith Moritz. I wouldn't. I would imagine she already strongly regrets this TV performance, where she's saying, "Oh, they tied her in knots, this, that, and the other. Didn't show enough emotion in court, all this kind of stuff." So I thought that was very, fascinating, and my reaction to it kind of surprised me a bit, but I think that's a testimony to how good it was. But what I wanted to ask you in relation to that is, how did you feel when you were making it?
Yeah, and a lot of people have said, I've seen a difference in the reactions. A lot of people have just raged. There was a person who said, watching this, I now don't want to do anything else in my life. I don't want to eat. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to do anything. And and it's kind of, gee, is that my fault? Have I gone too far? And all of those things. But I suppose that's how I felt. And it was the first two took about a month each, I think, and this one took more like 4 months. And there was a lot of things happening in my life, all good things, but then stuff that needed time. So I knew it was going to take longer. That was fine. But I was procrastinating quite a bit, and I think that's the reason why I just couldn't. It's such a dark heart. Everyone knows how this ends. Um, it's not got a happy ending, and it's like, do you really want to go through that? And it's a tough ask, and that was kind of hard to kind of get that tone exactly right. That is this just too much? Is this going to be unbearable? Someone said in part two that I just couldn't cope after 10 minutes, and it's like, well, I can't blame them. It's really grim, but I try. I don't know. I try not to make that so. So ending that film on "I'm Innocent," and it's very poignant, and I should say the voice actors that I get are so fantastic. They add immeasurably to this, and the woman who portrays Lucy she's just fantastic. She almost invariably gets it right immediately. She's her instincts are so good.
I must say the guy who played Evans managed to be really annoying, which I thought was great.
Yeah, yeah, he was new to me actually. After someone he was Welsh. He is Welsh, and so
Yeah,
someone wasn't doing an
yeah,
accent.
I thought they were all amazing,
Yeah, yeah,
amazing.
yeah. They were such a brilliant bunch, and they bring it to life.
Mm,
But that last ending on that last moment, I think, although it's deeply poignant and tragic and sad and all of that, if you accept that she hasn't done any of this, there is a sort of a quiet defiance about that. I think that she we know that she didn't turn up for the sentencing the first time round, and I wouldn't blame her in the slightest. Given, I mean, I don't want to go. It's just so dark. But this time she did, and she collected herself and thought, and to my mind, she probably went in thinking, I just want to come out of this saying that, so at least I can have had my voice, 2 words. People will hear what I said, and it's like there's something to draw from that. I think I don't want to, you know, second guess too much. I don't know Lucy, obviously, but I've spoken to a lot of people who did and have read an awful lot. I think she's probably stronger than most people imagine. That would be my guess.
mm,
That's not to say she didn't get broken. She did absolutely get broken. But I'm amazed she's even alive. I'm amazed she is functioning in any way. And it's like that was a moment of, I don't know. There was it sort of makes me want to punch the air a bit as well that she managed to say that. And so I don't know. I try overall not. And there are, there's occasional moments of wry humour and stuff. You usually need that. If it's just so unremittingly bleak, it just becomes unwatchable. So it's always a kind of a difficult balancing act to get that tone right, and you sort of find that on the way. But in short, it was hard. And I think I'm almost certainly making another one that I think will be easier to make because it's not kind of it's not. This is the dark heart of it all. That trial, I think, ending in the way it did. So it's hard to face. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's talk about Lucy's case. Now, we've already obviously naturally touched upon it to a certain extent, but I think everyone has a different interpretation uh, with regard to the following question, which is just simply, what are the most egregious and important aspects of the Lucy Letby case from your perspective?
Yeah. I mean, it's where do you start, isn't it?
Yeah,
But I think,
there are
yeah,
many. There are many. Don't limit yourself.
I've,
Um,
well, funnily enough, we've had this. We've got you almost find yourself making top tens. It's like,
yeah.
what's the worst thing? I think for me, so talking about it, I think, and given the conversation we just had, I do think it's Cheshire Police and the way that they began investigating the case. And it might not seem the worst things because it's I it makes me nervous when people focus on particular characters in the case and they start throwing hate towards them and saying how awful they are. And I've got strong views about them, and ultimately, some of them may have to look at facing justice themselves, all that stuff. But it goes back to the police and the job of the police. It's their job. They're going to get this all the time. Every day, they're going to have people walking through their doors saying stuff that um, they have to adjudicate. They have to, well, not adjudicate. They have to investigate. That's literally their job. And the way in which they went about that, I think, was so casual. I think, and the way they ran to the media, they ran to the parents. At least in one case, we know from Thirlwall, within days of starting this thing, say we're investigating a nurse. I just think that is so deeply shocking and so um, unprofessional. It's just terrifying to think we've got these emotive people who are running away on speculative theories. CPS would go with that as well, I would say. I mean, it's like, so all right, go with me here. I was thinking, imagine a 737 has come crashing down in a field, right? It's horrendous. There's just blackened, there's almost nothing left, and the police turn up and they're first on the scene, and they look round and they go, oh my, where on earth do we start? And imagine this old boy shuffles up to them and he goes, well, I used to work on them planes. Oh, well, I say them planes, but, they're propellers, but they're all the same, really, planes, aren't they? And they go, oh, really? He said, yeah, yeah, you stick with me. I'll tell you what happened. And they said, well, but surely we would get in the air accident investigation. Oh, no, 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 no. You don't need to bother with them. Not for a year, say. And imagine they said, yeah, all right, we'll go with this guy. And that is almost a perfect allegory of what happened in there. That the National Crime Agency said, right, you need all these people, you need these resources. And they said, no, we'll go with the guy who's just sidled up and said it's his kind of case, who, by the way, has diagnosed murder in 10 minutes. I think that we're so used to this now, those of us who are in the case, but that
mm,
is so deeply shocking.
mm,
And it's like that can't ever happen again. You can't ever get a case like this, which is complex medical stuff,
mm,
and they let one retired guy who was never even a fully qualified neonatologist, who isn't even registered, is he registered to practice, yeah, I think at the time.
that's absolutely true.
And to me, that's all the rest of them, all the whether or not you think they're bad actors or they were misguided or whatever. That's your job as the police to figure that stuff out, and I think that's the absolutely central core for me as the most egregious thing.
Yeah, I basically agree. Although there are other things you could bring forward as well, but to me, that's like the motorcycle and the sidecar that is the whole problem. But I think to just add to what you said, I think possibly the most alarming thing for me is in addition to what you've just said about the expert, and in addition to what you've just said about the police, you can have the expert running the whole court case, basically running the whole investigation, running the whole prosecution case to a great extent, and appearing in court and saying things that people know to be scientifically untrue, and other things that are extremely dubious at best. And then not only does that ultimately result in a prosecution with enormous consequences, but then when there's an appeal, the Court of Appeal says, okay, yeah, well, we're just going to ignore the fact that none of this science is correct because it happened in court. So because it happened in court, it's now correct. And what happened in actual reality is less important. In fact, it's not important at all. We've decided it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it's wrong. It doesn't matter that it's medically incorrect. It doesn't matter that it's scientifically incorrect. It was said by an expert. It doesn't matter about the caliber of that expert. We've decided the expert is okay. Although we didn't. Even we didn't even decide that because the judge ducked that decision and allowed the jury to decide. But because the jury decided, that's fine. So everything's fine. That's scary. That is scary because it can just happen all over again so easily.
Yeah.
At this point in time, as we sit here today, Lucy Letby is still a convicted serial killer of babies, and the Court of Appeal has said that the science that was used to do that is fine. So that not only have they rubber stamped this prosecution and this conviction, but theoretically that could be used as precedent. You could
Mm.
use that again in another case.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
There could be another multiple air embolism attack. And
yeah,
they just say, oh, well, look what happened in the Lucy Letby case. Look what the Court of Appeal judgment says. It says
yeah,
we can just use some, let me try and put this as politely as possible, retired pediatrician. It doesn't matter that he doesn't know anything. It doesn't matter that he didn't know what Optiflow was. It doesn't matter that he hadn't been in a hospital for 15 years. None of that, it doesn't matter that what he said was rubbish because we've decided it's in a court, so it's okay. And all that has ultimately rubber stamped that is a decision of the jury. It goes another. I did this circular process previously, but it's another circular process where it's like, how do we know this is good information because the jury decided? How did the jury decide based on the information? It's a catch-22. That is like something would be in the novel Catch-22. Just something that is just a bizarre bureaucratic nightmare that's been allowed to happen, and yet, as things stand today, it could just happen all over again.
yeah,
And that's an important reason for us to continue with this as the exoneration of Lucy Letby. Obviously, that's the human angle that people will tend to focus on, and rightly so. But the fact remains, this could just happen all over again. Not a similar thing, literally exactly the same thing could happen all over again. And Barrett, obviously, because of how high profile it's become, that's unlikely. But technically speaking, the barrister could say in court, look, we've got this precedent of it being done previously. And look what the Court of Appeal said about it at the time. And they said this. I mean, Dewi Evans could theoretically go into another court case and do the same thing all over again. There could be another nurse now in Huddersfield or somewhere, and 3 years down the line. Oh, who's a prosecution expert? Oh, it's Dewi Evans. Why is he in there? Oh, because the Court of Appeal says he's a suitable expert. So that to me is the most egregious aspect of this. But certainly the police investigation goes hand in hand with that. But it is the legal implications and the fact that the court system is so obviously inadequate, and yet it's so powerful,
yeah.
and
I,
that's
I agree with
scary.
everybody you said. It's the whole. It is. It's not even a system. It's a number of systems. It's
Yeah.
so many failures and so many egregious failures. So you could, yeah, you do that. I mean, if we're going with the top 10, I'd put the police number one because the rest of it wouldn't have happened had
Mm.
the police done their job. So that's the thing. It's just down the line. But in terms of horror, yeah, yeah, that's you can easily argue that's even worse. It's all awful, isn't it? It's all awful, Chris.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That is true. So
Right.
let's talk about the importance of narrative in this whole thing. So I know that's something you're really interested in, and I wrote about it quite a bit in my book because I think it's very important.
Yeah.
Um, so why is narrative so central to this whole debacle?
Okay. It is. Well, let's can I so I'll start with it's a hobby horse. Let me just start with a
Yeah.
hobby horse
Okay,
first.
let's do.
My hobby horse, when I'm watching a show or a film or something, the thing I hate more than anything is if a character does or says something, and the only reason they do it is because if they didn't do it, the plot wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So they're doing stuff out of character, they're saying
Yeah.
stuff out of character. And the only, yeah, but you've got this great plot and you've got to have this exciting third act and you've got to
The,
have all this
the kind of classic thing is in a horror film, someone will say, "Let's all split up and go in separate directions."
all of
Um,
that. All of that. We can all think of a million examples where we've seen that. Now, I call that bad writing. That's the jargon. Sorry to blind you with jargon. That's just bad writing if you're doing that. It's like I always think that good plot comes from character, really. It's like if three people get together in a room and they're those people in that circumstance, they will argue or they will do what, and that will lead them off to do an action. That's coherent writing. And that's, of course, what we're doing when we say that, because it's all well and good to talk about stories, but that's real life. It's like that's how things happen in real life. Occasionally, random things happen, but essentially, people don't act out of character without a really good reason. So that's what we know. So when we go to Cheshire Police and they're being they've got all this vast amounts of medical information that they don't understand or anything, and they need to turn all that stuff into a coherent narrative. That's the job, and to do that, they've got to create a believable character. And I think we've already touched on this right at the beginning, right? That you need to have someone, and it's again so. I totally agree with something you said earlier. When you because you watch crime all the time on TV, whether it be fictional or not, and you're going to get a bit blasé about awful things that people do. To do what she is accused of doing is not. She's not just regular evil. She's like the worst kind of evil. To
Mm.
do that to it, and it's to do that to little kids. It's just absolutely awful. So number one, she's got to be someone who is incredibly evil. Number two, she can't just be incredibly evil. She's also got to be an evil genius.
Mm.
That she has got what? How many methods of murder do they talk about or attack?
Goes air, milk, insulin, smothering, striking an infant, tool down the throat, supposedly. And it's not really entirely clear what Child J's method of was. It's at least seven, but I think there's probably forgotten
Did
some
he
of the
overfeeding? Did
allegations.
he get overfeeding in there?
Yeah,
He
yeah,
did, didn't he?
milk. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so seven. So most serial killers tend to have an MO. She's all over the place. She hasn't researched any of them. They've got all this evidence of everything that she looked and saw and did. There's no evidence of researching any of it. She just kind of figured this stuff out. She's not managed to leave any direct evidence for absolutely any of it. Um,
Oh, eight is extubation of the tube, of course.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
right, okay. So she's doing all this stuff without researching, without leaving any direct evidence. So she's got to be about the most evil person that's ever lived, and she's got to be about the smartest, most brilliant, cunning person that ever lived. Because if you haven't got that, they're not going to believe your story. And so they have to create, and we'll come on to this. Ultimately, they have to create a picture of this which is so tightly controlled that you eliminate all the other pieces of information that don't fit in with that picture, and so that the jury, that's what they'll see, and that's all I see, and the jury have got to buy that. That's their job. So they have to have a very carefully constructed narrative with a central character that you can believe did the things they allege if you're going to win. So it's absolutely crucial. Getting that story right, getting that narrative right. You're not going to get a conviction if you don't. Yeah. So that's the first thing. And I don't know. Should we? I mean, is it work? So if we think of Lucy as that evil genius and compare perhaps with what we know about Lucy, that she's the kindest. She's not just a regular, bit dodgy, but no, she's just like she is just almost beyond reproach. She was called the creme de la creme by her nursing boss, wasn't she?
It's Karen Reed.
Um, she would do all the overtime whenever they wanted, and she had a wide social circle of friends. Very often, people who are have got personality disorders, they're loners and stuff. And she wasn't. She was kind of shy, but that's okay. But she came out of a shell with friends, and she had good friends, and she liked pizza and Ellie Goulding and yeah, cinema and all
Mm.
it's very, very regular stuff,
Mm.
rescue animals, and not a single thing they can find.
I think
So
I
there's a
think
massive,
I might add,
yeah,
Guy, very very feminine, I would say.
yeah, I think
Um,
that's fair. She's quite a girly girl.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's true. I yeah, she's got, you look
it's
in
not
her
like
room.
football. It's not like football and
No,
car racing, is it? It's
no, it's not. It's
not that they're exclusively male interests, but
no,
you know
she's
what I
very
mean.
pink, and what does she have over her bed? It was something about
Yeah,
sparkles that
Yes, something
got
about yeah,
something like that. And it's all, that's Loving Cats. That's the very much the picture I think that she is,
yes,
and Souls are Dancing as well. That's all.
yes.
Um, and there's a massive, massive disconnect there, isn't there? So they've got to do this job where they've got to somehow turn this person, that this is what the objective information says about them, into the most evil, the most cunning person. Because that's another thing. She's a hard worker, she's a grafter, but I don't think there's any sense of anything that she is an incredible, prodigious intellect or anything like that. She just works really hard, and she has achieved brilliant things from hard work and graft. So none of that matters. How on earth are you going to do that? How are you going to turn your that character? I mean, you won't be. I should be careful. They're not doing this consciously, I hope, but you have to be looking for signs. So essentially, the big tool is cherry picking, isn't it? You have to find things that look bad, and they've got a gift. They've got. I think they said they recovered 500,000 words in terms of all her scribbling and all her emails and all the text. So not 500,000 words they sifted through, and three of them are "I am evil," and another three is "I did this." And so you can extrapolate those, and on the face of it, well, that's case closed, my lord. But this is something that very you were very sharp on, that you spotted immediately that wasn't a confession, because you look at it in the round and there's I haven't done anything wrong, I'm tortured, she's just clearly a distressed woman, and most reasonable people I think would see that. So you have to sort of suppress that and just cherry pick those things that do that. And they do that all the time. They do that with Facebook searches.
Mm.
Okay, so this is actually, because it was like, what was it, 1%,
Yeah,
showing
it's just over
1%.
1%. Yeah,
So it's like she is masking her obsession with people with no, what's the mess? How many? How? It's just like thousands of percent more, just to mask the fact you're obsessed by these parents. Or is it that she just is curious about people that she meets and searches them,
mm.
like lots of people?
Mm.
Handover sheets. I don't know, about 2-3% of the population are hoarders. I don't think you can even really describe her as a hoarder as such, but she bad at throwing things away, and she should dispose of them confidentially. And it's like you amplify that to
Mm.
be, these are medical records, and this is terrible. This is all highly unusual. And despite the nurses are kind of saying not that highly unusual, you just cherry pick and you separate that. And now that's how you do it. That's how you. And some of the things she said, they came out in Thurl, but apparently she said in 2012, "I just want to get my first death out of the way." Now, this is what I mean about bad writing, right? Something like that. That Let's imagine for a moment she is a serial killer. Is she going to meet someone she's never met before, which I think was the context of that, and say, "Can't wait to get my plan of killing babies going"? Oh, and it'd take 3 years to do it. No human being in the world would do that. No, if you're the biggest evil person in the world, you're not going to announce it in that way if you are now being so cunning later and suppressing it. Or is the other explanation that she's just starting work, she's just done the theory, and now she's starting and she's terrified about how she's going to respond when there is a death on the unit, and is she going to fall to pieces and all that? And they're just saying, "I'm just going to get it out of the way, and then I know I can deal with it," like a vast majority of healthcare professionals would say a version of that. And so you're twisting her words, twisting her actions, anything you can to suppress this 99% of evidence that is all saying she's a completely normal person who's bad at throwing things away and searches things on Facebook. That's how you do it. That's their job. That's why narrative is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess back with a bang would be another example of what you were saying,
Oh
where
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
just doesn't make any sense, obviously.
it's
Um,
it's fun. It's darkly. If you think of it in terms of a real murderer saying stuff like that, it's
yeah,
ridiculous.
Yeah.
There was one time when she won something on the Grand National, and
Yeah.
she was happy on the same day that a baby collapsed.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a
Absolutely.
psychopath.
Yeah.
It's like we've seen babies are collapsing on that ward almost every single day. You get breaks, you get times when that's again, it's just normal life again and again and again that is taken and twisted and manipulated. Yeah.
So how do you think the reality of who Lucy is has become obscured and twisted? What is the mechanism?
It is cherry picking. I think that is basically the mechanism. I do think, and well, that's number one. And two is suppression. It's like those, it's something else perhaps we could come on to, but it's like there was no character witnesses for her. There was no one to speak up for her. There was no one saying, there was just Dawn on Panorama after it was over saying, hold on, this person that I know is nothing like who you've all been talked about. And so it's really important that you control that, the stem of information, and you exclude whatever you can so that the jury never hears. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So lastly, in this section, the discussion, in terms of narrative, we want to talk about the importance of belief in the narrative and how
Yeah.
this played a major role in Lucy's prosecution.
Yep. Yeah. Crucial. That there's a real lovey cliche, isn't there? That you're on a movie set and the cameras are ready to go and everyone's ready to go and the actor's there and they say to the director, darling, darling, they say, because that's how all actors talk. Darling, darling, what's my motivation? And it's just the kind of, it's just such a cliche and well, nonsense. It's a really vital question. What is my motivation? What do I want out of a situation? What am I about? Is what they're saying. And of course, that's as a writer, as a screenwriter, that's everything. Your characters and your motivation for your characters. This is why they say and do the things they do. It's absolutely key. And so when you're looking at the quote characters, the people that are involved in this case, you start wondering, okay, what's your motivation? Let's look at the doctors, right? What's their motivation? And that's you know, there's lots of disagreement on what their motives were, but some things we can say pretty much solidly because they tell us. They are raising this issue because they have seen Lucy is around a lot and they have a gut feeling, right? That comes up again and again. And so what happens is eventually they go to the managers and the managers go, well, oh my God, right, let's take Lucy off the unit. We'll downgrade the unit so we're covered, so that we've not got so many sick babies coming in. Right, where's this evidence? What have you got? And they say nothing. They have got no evidence whatsoever. She puts in a grievance. They ask the RCPCH come along. Everyone says, there is nothing. There is no evidence. And so at that point, they said the managers say, well, we're finding for Lucy here. We're backing Lucy because you've had these horrendous allegations without anything to back them up. Okay. They then hit the roof. They then go crazy because they are not being listened to. And they eventually, after a number of months, go to the police. And when it comes to the going to the police, we've seen them discussing, they still haven't got any evidence by that time, but they now have a story. They've now found that when Ravi says he walks in and standing behind her doing nothing while the baby's desaturating, that's powerful. And then they say that to the police, and the police believe them. And that's the key. This is why, to me, it's the most egregious thing. That's the response. We believe you. And Ravi says in that interview, finally, they can see it straight away. Why couldn't you see it? And I think, okay, your belief is this. All they've done is ask for grounds for which you believe something, and you haven't been able to provide any. They have done a reasonable job at that. Whereas the police have gone, now we believe, doctors have come in saying that they must be true. Never mind the fact that they've now been found guilty of victimizing the person they're saying might have done this. Let's roll out the red carpet and make them the golden thread of the investigation. But that key thing that Steve Watts talked about is just absolutely central, that they believed them. And so I think for the doctors, this is why they were on the warpath. They believe, and whether or not how entirely genuine all that was, did they make themselves believe it? Did they really believe it? Did they, whatever? We just have to say, well, they believed it. That's the thing. And the police, they believed it. And so then you've got people who ideologically are trying to stop a serial killer. And it's like super, super important. And so that's their motivation. You're trying to stop a serial killer. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt that it's all really genuine. But essentially, it's all done on belief. It's not done on evidence, and it's belief is faith. It's like anything. It's like any of us might believe. We all have faith and belief in different things, and that's fine. But it's very different from evidence. And so, when you've got that conviction that they were convinced like that in the police, that gives them the motivation, and the motivation, if you're not very very careful, is we need to get her. We need to nail her because she's the evil serial killer. It's not that right, we need to start from principles. We need to, what is there we can find that looks like it's consistent with her being a serial killer? And that's not investigation. That's a faith-based exercise where you are looking for cherry picking for things to support your faith. So in terms of motivation, will know I can't speak for Ravi and Stephen Brewer and all the reasons, all that kind of stuff. But we, even if you accept that they are in all acting in good faith, it's faith. That's what it is. And so therefore the motivation is a real problem that they have to, professionally, you have to put that to one side and you have to say, right, I'm not going to contaminate this. Let's start methodically, look at all the things that's going on in the unit. And there's no indication they did any of that. And if there was, why haven't they released the logs for us to see it? So,
Hmm.
yeah, belief, the role of belief here, and it comes up again and again and again. We have, yeah, it's to me, it's based on faith, this whole thing, not really on evidence.
Absolutely. So that's a great place to bookmark this first part of our discussion. We're going to continue discussing this issue in another video soon, but and we're going to record that right now. But I thought this would be a nice place to end this first part of the discussion. Um, so just say thank you to Guy for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.